Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. I find some of my videos I made in the early days of this channel difficult to watch. The content is still relevant, I think, so I decided to remake a couple of them. Hopefully viewers will cringe less while watching these newer versions. This time I am remaking my reading experience of the Riftwar Saga by Raymond E. Feist. It was my 16th video on this channel, which I published on July 31st of 2023. In this remake I more or less stick to the same script. In the old version of the video I did enter spoiler territory. This remake will be free of spoilers. Let's begin. The entire Riftwar series contains 30 or more books. I just finished reading the first series, published from 1982 to 1986. I read it as a quadrilogy, with Magician being separated into two books, Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. I flew through the series, starting the first book at the end of May and finishing the final one on the 18th of June. Let's take a look at each of the books separately. Magician Apprentice, 485 pages. I read it in May of 2023. The servant boy Pug becomes apprentice to Kulgan, magician and advisor to the Duke of Crydi. Pug grows increasingly frustrated by his lack of progress in his magical studies. Only when he's attacked does he find access to his magic. From there on, the huge promise of Pug carries the story forward in an entertaining way. The magic system in Magician Apprentice is hardly explained, which is fine with me. A story can work very well without extensive explaining of details or backgrounds. The why or how don't have to be essential to the story. Still, I also like to read fantasy with a so-called hard magic system. The way Raymond E. Feist introduces the first signs of something strange going on, meaning of course the rift which connects Pug's world of Midkemia with that of Tsuranwani, reads like a mystery novel. The book has many highlights, but one of my favorite scenes is where two characters meet a golden dragon called Ruarg. The ancient beast is dying of old age and requests the two visitors to hold his death watch. It is the way of my people to sit the death watch, but there are none of my kind near enough to call. I would ask thee to wait for my passing before thy leaving. Wilt thou? This touching scene has everything I look for in fantasy: beauty, reverence, wisdom, purpose, and more. Feist has created the perfect balance between story development, action, characterization, mystery, world building, and so on. I also applaud his writing skills. One example of this. I fear we will all be in deep water soon, my Lord Boric. I pray that this invasion you speak of will not be the wave that drowns us. I gave Magician Apprentice 82 points out of 100. I was thoroughly enjoying myself when around 3/4 into the book the story got stranded in seemingly endless battle sequences. They pretty much take up the rest of the book. We lose sight of Pug, which is a pity. Fighting scenes and battles that take up too much space are not my favorite kind of reading in fantasy. Perhaps it is as one of the characters at the end of the second Magician book says, "I'm getting too old for much more of this nonsense of war and politics." If the author had been swifter about telling this part of the story, my rating no doubt would have been higher. Magician Master, 499 pages. I read this one in June of 2023. In this book, Pug rises to become one of the most powerful wizards that ever lived. I love the university trope, and this one is very well executed with many mind-blowing scenes. Apprentices wear white and are not allowed to talk, let alone ask questions. During his 4 years of training, some questions keep recurring. As long as he cannot find the right answer to those questions, the teachers will keep asking them. Like this one. In what manner are you allowed to serve? After many wrong answers, Pug finally understands it, and he answers, as I see fit. Another question that keeps being asked is, where is your allotted place? Without exception, Pug answers, my place is here. One night, at the end of his education, a man in a dream tells Pug, consider this, you are the architect of your own imprisonment. The next day, Pug walks up to his guide and says, this is no longer my place. These turn out to be the magical words for him to change from apprentice white to the grey of the next level. In another dream, the same man picks up a spider from a flower and puts it back on another flower. He asks Pug, do you think the creature knows that this is a different flower? I don't know. That is perhaps the wisest of all answers. I really love that. One of the most enjoyable characters is Amos Trask, the ship's captain. His language is coarse but inventive. The ship's a slab-sided, wattle-bottomed, water-rotted coaster, Highness, but she'll make it through if I have to pick her up and carry her. Behind Amos's rough exterior hides a wise man. You know what it is to laugh at death. You'll never be the same man again. It is something a few know in their lives. It's a vision of something so clear, so true, it can only be a madness. You see what life is worth, and you know what death means. Later on, he portrays himself accurately. Take any deep-water sailor who's faced death at sea as many times as I have, and scratch him lightly. Underneath, you'll find a philosopher. No fancy words, I'll warrant you, but a deep, abiding sense of his place in the world. Feist is a very gifted teller and writer. I find proof of that in small details, like this short sentence. They stood in tableau for a time. A less skilled writer would have written something like they didn't move for a time or they stood still for a time. It's these very little things that I can enjoy in a book. The elaborate and detailed political intrigue didn't do much for me. Most of the people involved here remain side characters to me, so I couldn't care less who'd come out on top of the political games. Because of this, like in the first Magician book, the final chapters were a bit of a letdown to me. My rating for Magician Master is also 82 points out of 100. Even though I very much enjoyed this book, there were also many pages that bored me a little. Silverthorn, 343 pages, and I also read this one in June of 2023. Silverthorn was the least of the 4 books in the Riftwar Saga for me. The first half seems to tell a non-essential story to the series, and its pacing is very slow compared to the other books. In an assassination attempt on Prince Arutha, his wife is struck by a poisonous bolt. The entire rest of this book is about this quest Arutha and his party undertake to find the extremely rare Silverthorn plant, which holds the antidote that will save the princess. Thankfully, it is well written, which helps a lot getting through the pages. Another plus is the fact that Amos Trask is present and that we are introduced to Jimmy the Hand, another very entertaining character. Despite the many highlights in this book, I mainly wanted to get back to Pug's story. The high-level writing reveals itself in the following metaphor. Jimmy the Hand finds that life used to be much simpler. He tried to put on a brighter expression, but at best he resembled a cat who had fallen into a barrel of cream, unsure of whether to lap it up or swim for his life. I also enjoyed little things like the way Feist illustrates the importance and beauty of protocol. When two parties meet, the men perfunctorily touched index finger to heart, lips, and forehead, a gesture indicating a generous heart, a truthful tongue, and a mind harboring no deceit. Around page 250 until the end, I enjoyed the book better. The pacing picked up and more references to the overall story made it more intriguing. We are introduced to some of the enemy's nature, the overall danger that threatens the worlds on both sides of the rift. The ending, where a hidden society of ancient elves is discovered, is nothing less than magical. I gave Silverthorn 73 points out of 100. In short, the book suffers from middle book syndrome in my view, but still, it nicely sets the stage for the last part of this series. A Darkness at Sethanon, 430 pages, also read in June of 2023. This book contains everything that makes fantasy my go-to genre. The entire sequence where the main characters come into contact with the owl, some sort of ethereal being, kept me on the edge of my reading seat. The surrealistic environment the author transported me into felt very real. Next to this quest there are the necessary battles and sieges. But this time, the battle for the city of Sethanon, from the title, is truly epic and wonderful to read. The stakes are incredibly high, and I could feel that the whole time the fighting continued. One of the most beautiful sequences during one of the war chapters is this next one. He picked up a small felt hammer and rang a tiny gong. Listen. Baru closed his eyes in meditation, listening to the sound as it faded, diminishing, becoming fainter. When the sound was fully gone, Charles said, "Find where the sound ends and silence begins. Then exist in that moment, for there will you find your wall. It is your secret center of being, the perfect place of peace within yourself." Also, the ending after all the fighting is done is epic in scope and surrealistic in the best possible way. For me, this, without a doubt, was the absolute highlight of the entire series and one I will think back on regularly. Nothing is forever, Pug. Nothing. Immortality, power, dominance, all are illusions. Don't you see? We are simply pawns in a game beyond our understanding. For fear of entering spoiler territory, I will not quote anything more, although I really would have loved to. Let's just say that this kind of storytelling is right up my alley. Even though the war fought in this book is the most interesting of the whole series, it becomes almost redundant when I compare it to the unraveling of the entire universe in the final pages. I gave A Darkness at Sethanon 90 points out of 100. I admire how Feist brings several storylines together at the end, as well as his many plot twists. In the end, everything is explained in a convincing way and in an overwhelming and somewhat bombastic finale. All in all, I would highly recommend this series to any reader who is interested in fantasy. There is some slog and a couple of less interesting parts, but the highs trump the lows in the end. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.